I want to get into some more detail here. Speaker Mike Johnson is the source or on the receiving end of a number of hateful headlines right now, just attacking him for being Christian. Story after story of the Mother Jones. Mike Johnson conducted seminars promoting the U.S. as a Christian nation. The New York Times with a piece. Speaker Mike Johnson and the role of religion in politics. CNN. Mike Johnson symbolizes a new turn for the religious right. New York Magazine, Speaker Mike Johnson's old-time religion. The New Republic is saying that Mike Johnson has a dangerous victim complex, writing about his Christianity. And on and on and on. There are headlines everywhere on this subject. And not only are there headlines, you also have the late-night shows with their dwindling audiences deciding to alienate even their remaining Christian viewers. Here's Stephen Colbert last night.
That Hannity interview wasn't the first time Johnson advocated for his idea of a Christian government. This is him on the House floor just 6 months ago.
Jefferson clearly did not mean that metaphorical wall was to keep religion from influencing issues of civil government. To the contrary, it was meant to keep the federal government from impeding the religious practice of citizens. The founders wanted to protect the church from an encroaching state, not the other way around.
Exactly. You can read all about it in Jefferson's famous essay, "Yeah, I didn't mean that." Obviously, what he's saying is a crazy interpretation of the separation of church and state. Jefferson used that wall metaphor because a wall is closed off to both sides.
Yeah, and of course, Stephen Colbert wrong, Mike Johnson correct. Here's more Colbert mocking Mike Johnson's faith. He also says that he's trying to remove rights from gay people.
You don't want politics in your church, but if you let church into your politics, you end up with guys like Mike Johnson representing the church to young people, and they're all going to say, "No thanks, Jesus," no matter how fun it is at Youth Pastor Ricky's Leviticus karaoke night. Now, one big way Johnson wants to slip a little church tongue in your state hole, taking rights away from gay people. When the Supreme Court struck down anti-sodomy laws on privacy grounds, Johnson wrote, "By closing those bedroom doors, they have opened a Pandora's box."
Well, things have definitely gotten very crazy in the country, haven't they? They've gone bananas to the point that you are paying for abortions and transgender operations in the military now. So for anybody who ever said, "Oh, there's no slippery slope to any of this," well, we've slipped down the slope, son. But Mike Johnson does have thoughts on this idea of gay marriage as an institution in the country. He spoke to Sean Hannity about this last week, and if Stephen Colbert wasn't so dishonest, he might reference this.
On the marriage issue, no one has discussed that for as long as I can remember. This has been settled by the Supreme Court in the Obergefell opinion in 2015. So right. That's the decision. Now, they changed the definition of marriage that had been regarded by basically every human society for 5,000 years, but when 5 justices on the Supreme Court changed it, that became the law of the land. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I respect that, and we move forward.
Yeah, Mike Johnson also said it doesn't really matter what he believes fundamentally. The way you achieve something in government is you have to get other people to agree with you. You've got to have some consensus in order to change laws and to change minds. And so on that issue, he's on the losing end, and he said that out loud. Joining us now is Chris Bedford. He's the executive editor of the Common Sense Society magazine, and he's been watching all of this closely. Chris, thank you very much for joining us, as always.
Glad to be here.
Are you surprised by the attacks on Mike Johnson's faith that have come out so quickly?
No, not at all. I mean, Mike Johnson, despite the constant attacks that Republicans have been subject to for decades, Mike Johnson is really the first social conservative to be in a major position of Republican leadership in decades. There's been a lot of people on the Republican right who will pay lip service to these sorts of things, but you'll notice they very rarely do things. Until Donald Trump, none of them even showed up at the March for Life. They never want to talk about marriage. But yet you had the chairman of the Freedom Caucus voting in favor of gay marriage a few months ago before he suddenly realized, wait, we're supposed to be against that, and had to lobby the Senate the other way and say, wait, don't vote for what I just voted for. So a lot of that's atrophied. And now you finally have someone who's actually a social conservative in the seat. And one of the reasons why this position was abandoned by so many, even though it's really a core concern to a lot of the Republican base and to a lot of the American people, and was a core concern of the founding fathers, is because of the vitriol and the hate and the lunacy that's directed towards you. It's funny, one of those headlines that you mentioned was that he has a victim complex about being a Christian. And it was among, 20, 30, 40 headlines attacking him for being a Christian from the absolute heights of power. It's like, how dare he feel like he's under attack for his beliefs? People like Stephen Colbert, it's sad. If I recall, he's a Catholic. He refers to himself as kind of a faithful Catholic. And his generation has really overseen a massive, massive decline in church attendance. If any of the bishops or any of the lay leaders were CEOs in the private sphere, and they lost 50, 60% of the faithful, and there were periods where half of people who called themselves Catholics didn't even understand the basic tenets, well, everybody would be fired. Yeah. So to take lectures from him, take lectures from the tambourine thwacking heretics like him is really rich.
Yeah, he mocked Mike Johnson. They even did like a parody video last night, like of some movie that Mike Johnson would get involved in Noah's Ark, and how there'd be dinosaurs on the Ark, and they're trying to make a mockery of him. And I'm a Catholic, you're a Catholic. In this case, I couldn't imagine. I wouldn't make a mockery of a Christian just because, like, for instance, Catholics are more open-minded on the specifics of creation than some other Christian sects. But that doesn't matter. I'm not going to sit here and mock you for those differences of opinion. But that's what Stephen Colbert did. He did that last night because I don't know what he's trying to do, but it's insulting, and it's meant to be demeaning. And the effect of it is not to achieve anything that he supposedly goes to church for, but instead quite the opposite, which is to make a mockery of faith broadly.
And I was watching the clip that you sent me a few hours ago, and I was quietly cursing you for making me watch it. I have a life, so I didn't actually watch it last night.
Right.
And it's amazing how just incredibly smug the humor is, how much late-night comedy has changed since I really stopped watching it 15 or so years ago, to maybe broad but kind of liberal, to just so insular, so navel-gazing, so incredibly smug in the New York City superiority to the rest of the world, and also just how shocked these people are to find out that there are people out there who actually hold Christian beliefs. I mean, you hear a lot about, well, all religions need to get along. You need to tolerate this, you need to tolerate that. But when they actually hear what a Christian believes, well, there's no toleration for that. There's so many lectures from people who are non-believers or have insane beliefs on what you as a Christian ought to believe, and don't you think this and don't you think that. And the crowd out there cheering that, I guess, a fundamental Christian precept is to seize wealth from the citizens and hand it back and hand it out to progressive policies. That was the one Christian policy he supposedly mentioned that they got an applause line. I guess he missed church a few weeks ago when they said to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and to render unto God what is God's. The smugness and the ignorance of American history, of Christian theology is wild. And like you pointed out, on Jefferson, we talk all this time about the wall between the church and the state based on one line in the Jefferson letter that he wrote talking about this sort of thing. At a time when different religious sects controlled European governments, when different Christian sects controlled before their American states, controlled some of the states, and used it to punish other Christian sects that they didn't agree with. Like it was illegal to be a Catholic in Maryland until the Constitution was ratified. For example, at least you paid huge fines to do so. But all of these founders, including Thomas Jefferson, wrote consistently about the need for education in America to spread Christian virtue and Christian values. They talked about consistently about how this Constitution is entirely inadequate for an immoral people. And these folks who people like Stephen Colbert want to cite to make their case actually believe completely the opposite from them. But you would never hear that in the audience because they're so unconcerned with alternative viewpoints.
Yeah. Why is it that they're so threatened by one guy? It's not like, we're at some great risk of the entire government imposing Christianity on everybody. Like Mike Johnson, one guy who says, yeah, I read the Bible. How is he some monster threat? Because last I checked, all of our institutions are right now kind of being run by people who despise the Bible. I'm not under the impression that there's some great risk of Christian nationalism taking over.
Well, one person speaking the truth might actually be a threat. The darkness absolutely hates the light. Like when you turn on that light the first thing in the morning and your eyes hurt just to see it. There's been a lot of atrophy in Washington, D.C., where there's an entire Republican Party that can talk to you up and down all day and night about the need to cut this tax bracket that affects almost none of their voters, or the need to change this regulatory policy that affects almost none of their voters, or the need to send more guns and forces to Ukraine, which affects almost none of their voters. But there are very few Republicans out there who are strong and are capable and are confident in the truth and in their religious beliefs and in morality to go out there and be able to stand up to it. And that's why so many places have been steamrolled by this transgender nonsense. That's why so many places have been steamrolled by left-wing kind of morality, why people feel like they don't have the moral arguments to say, no, a wildly crazy adult man is not allowed in my daughter's bathroom because it's immoral and it's wrong and it's dangerous. There's been such an atrophy. So I'm hopeful, although that Sean Hannity interview, there was a lot of backtracking from Speaker Johnson. I'm really hopeful that maybe he'll actually be able to give voice to so many people, and really millennia of tradition that say, hey, hang on a second, America. We're in a pretty wild and completely incorrect place.
No question. And I'm hopeful too. This is a big job to be Speaker of the House. It's a lot of, herding cats, they say. But it seems critical to me that he be a speaker that is the same guy we saw in previous iterations in Congress, where he would stand up and kind of forcefully talk about the things he believes in, why it's good, and what we should fight for. I just hope he doesn't succumb to all of the pressures of leadership that so many do.
A lot of this job is tactical, for sure. The speaker is not a king. The speaker has to work with a wide range of Republicans and sometimes even Democrats who come from different religions and different backgrounds and different constituencies. So it's not exactly something that's just ideological, but ideology does play an important part in it. I mean, for example, you see Mitch McConnell out there, who is very much a tactician, basically ready to shut down the government over funding to Ukraine. Now, that's something that he wants to do because it's core and central to his ideology. Imagine if a conservative Republican got up there or if Mitch McConnell took that kind of vigor to the border fight, or if Mitch McConnell took that kind of vigor to abortion. It wasn't just a senator from Alabama out there standing on his own.
Yeah.
Well, that would change. So while it is a tactical position, there's a huge amount of what you really care about that goes into it.
Totally. And when you say it out loud, people have to pick a side. So get out first and say it. And like you said, Tommy Tuberville is one of the only people who's like standing up for anything decent. I noticed today, I'll get into this later, but there's a story right now about the Marine Corps Commandant, General Eric Smith, who just became Commandant recently. He was out running this weekend, and he had a heart attack near where he lives near the Marine Barracks at 8th and I. And we don't know the status of his health right now. It sounds rough. He's been hospitalized as a result of all of this. And I'm watching today, everybody's attacking Tommy Tuberville over this. The man just had a heart attack, the Marine Corps Commandant, and they needed to put some 3-star in charge because they don't have an assistant commandant right now in the Marine Corps that's been confirmed by the Senate. The reason for that is because Chuck Schumer hasn't confirmed one. That's why that's happened. And the reason for that is because the Pentagon keeps funding abortions so they don't get a blanket sign-off from Tommy Tuberville. Tuberville's like, you're breaking the law. I'm not going to give you sweeping nominees a go-ahead. You'll put them through one by one. And Chuck Schumer refuses to do it because that's how much they love abortion. He prefers that over having a military be ready. And it is amazing to me, Chris Bedford, to watch all of this play out. And then the media will ape the talking point. They say, oh, Tommy Tuberville is making the military less safe. And it's opposite world constantly, every single day.
And when the Department of Defense was challenged, I think it was this week, to try and produce any of its data that said that it was central to their military readiness to provide abortion on demand to soldiers and to provide sex changes, they were unable to provide any of that evidence because it's just ideology. It's got nothing to do with military readiness. It makes no sense on a military readiness standpoint. And Tommy Tuberville's out there, and Democrats are being dishonest. Although I will also say, I mean, I hope the Commandant gets better. I really do. But if I was President of the United States, I think the first thing I would do would be accept the resignations of everyone who was over 2 stars in the Pentagon and say we're going to get rid of some of these political glad handers and we're going to go back to having actual officers. And hey, if we could win a war, that'd be good too.
That would be really good. Chris Bedford, thank you very much, as always, sir, from the Common Sense Society magazine. Good to talk to you today, sir.